Over the past few weeks, I've been spending time interviewing people I think you should know, because really, I believe every person has gold inside of them. As a pastor, I'm usually the one who's doing the talking, but today I sit down with my longtime friend Ben Rath, who usually prefers not to do the talking. But you will see that when Ben talks, you should probably pay attention because he is a profound thinker and a great communicator. I usually sit down with my friends in a place that's nostalgic to them, but today we sit down in our chapel. Why is this so significant, you might ask? Because Ben and I have known each other since 2002. And I would say that since 2007, we both knew that we might eventually work together in ministry. This place represents a dream God was stirring in our hearts for probably over 14 years. Before Ben worked full-time in ministry in the local church, he had great success in the business world. He's a Grove City grad, and if you know anything about Grovers, they just think differently. Ben has a unique ability to solve problems, confront issues, and create win-win situations, and I just simply regard him as a logistical genius. But what separates Ben most from many others is that he just loves people. Above all of his processes he creates, he loves people. His wife, Alicia, I'm sure has a role in that, and Alicia is easily one of the most hospitable people I know. Ben and Alicia have 3 amazing kids, Danica, Landon, and Ari. It's been so refreshing to be reunited with my friend in this amazing but unique season of ministry, and I hope today you see why. All right, Ben, the most important question I'm going to ask you all day, we're just going to start with it.
Let's start hard.
What did you shoot this fall? What did you get?
I shot one doe with my bow. Mm-hmm. That rhymes. Doe with a bow. And then I shot a coyote that came out in the middle of a deer hunt. And anytime you see a coyote in a deer hunt, your deer hunt immediately becomes a coyote hunt. You got to get them. They all got to go.
Yeah. Did it yipe really bad whenever you shot it?
No, he had no idea what it
I don't
did.
know if this is too much detail.
No, I smoked it. It was done.
Did you really?
Yeah.
What do you mean you smoked it?
I mean, it was 150 yards away, and I was looking at, like, in my scope, I hit it right in the brisket with 30-6.
So I don't, okay.
Yeah.
That wasn't a bow.
No, I rolled it.
I was like 130 yards.
Yeah.
On a bow
No, that was a rifle
really
shot.
Good.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, I didn't have a bow for that.
But you got your doe.
Could you imagine a 130-yard bow shot?
Yeah, I know. Well,
Viking days.
I'm not really a. Yes, I can. I can't imagine.
I put a wad of flaming material on the end.
Yes.
It's really
The
dramatic.
deer caught on fire in the middle of the field.
Yes.
You sent it out on a boat.
I did. Precisely.
The arc was perfect. Oh man. So did anybody ever ask you, did you catch a deer?
Yeah, that's actually the way I get at the most.
Most non-hunters will say, did you catch anything?
Did you catch a deer? Yeah.
You do not want to catch something when you're hunting.
No, I'm not sure how you would.
Yeah.
Like little noose traps on the ground, like lasso.
Okay, so you've hunted for how many years now? Like when did you get into that?
Yeah, well, I hunted a little bit in high school.
Okay.
Just being around the farm and stuff. And then my best friend, Jason, growing up, he hunted. So I hunted with him and hung out. But I didn't really know what I was doing. It was more like, it wasn't really hunting. It was like if something walks out, we'll kill it. I've kind of come to learn like the finer.
Did that work?
Yeah, I mean, eventually you sit out long enough,
there's something out there.
Something will walk out and you can kill it. But I kind of learned the finer points of hunting. Like look at like learning about the animal. Like it'll sound weird to say. People will be like, I can't believe you like to hunt or like to kill deer or whatever. Like, you don't love deer? And I'm like, I actually think I might love them more than somebody who is against killing them, because you get such an appreciation for them, spending so much time out. I mean, some of these deer I watch, like they're born last year. You watch them grow. You watch them go through their first set of antlers. Like you get this,
and then you shoot them,
and then you eat them. So it comes full circle. It's not just if it ends.
It's a stretch. Like I love them more than you.
I think I do. No, I think I do. I don't know if I love them more. I have a greater appreciation, I think.
Well, I bet that.
I'll bet you I understand the
I could give in
species.
there.
I'll bet you I understand that more than somebody who's kind of a hunter.
Like everything in life, you have you've studied this, you've figured it out.
Yeah, it's my greatest fault.
It's your greatest fault. What do you mean?
Well, in the sense that like I won't do anything if I don't think I can be good at it, and I think I have a lot of insecurity even growing up that I'm not going to be good at anything. That's a lie I have had to wrestle with a lot.
Yeah.
And so I think I overcompensate by. Because I'm going to learn everything I can and go all in. I want to know everything about it. I want to know all the aspects of it. I want to learn from other people's failures, from the way things they learned, successes they have. I want to have the best equipment. Like at the end of the day, I don't want there to be anything to blame but me if it doesn't happen.
Yeah.
Like I all excuses aside.
See, this is why I like being around you, because I hate doing research.
Yeah.
And I know if Ben buys it, it's going to be
it's going to be thought through. It's going to be good. Just
Yeah.
buy what Ben buys,
Yeah.
and I'm okay.
Right. That's fair.
Does that offend you at all?
No,
Because I'm like, if I put all
Actually,
the
it makes
time in
you, it feels like a compliment.
it is a compliment. I
Yeah.
mean it as one. That's for sure.
Yeah, I like it. I do. I want to know what I'm getting into.
Yeah. What's your favorite place you've ever hunted? Is it your farm? Well, not your farm, your grandfather's farm.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a special place.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, from my youngest days growing up there, like I learned to drive on the farm, driving tractors and stuff. So
Yes.
being up on that farm it's just special. So it's my favorite place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that where you hear from God?
For sure. I mean, like being in a tree stand. I mean, we've had this conversation before, but like being in a tree stand for me, there's something about you get in there at dark. There's nothing you can do until the light starts to come up. It's so quiet. The earth is kind of slowly awakening around you. You're gonna hear the songbirds first. You're gonna hear the squirrels and the chipmunks start to rustle on the leaves, and like there's just such a connection. It's so peaceful and so quiet. And so, for me, it just in some of the seasons of life that were so busy, I didn't have that type of a space. And I was just like, when I go to the farm, I'm able to turn all the noise down. And I don't know how else to say it. There's something special that happens for me when I can turn the noise down and turn the quiet up.
Yeah.
Like I don't know how else to say it, but that's what it turns the quiet up. You go to a place that there's no light pollution, there's no city light, there's nothing, just pitch black. Whatever stars are in the sky, that's the light you got.
There could be a bear underneath of your stand.
Yeah, there could be.
I don't know if you know this, but I don't like bears.
I do know that. Yeah.
So, but no, that's like really profound. Especially, I think one of the things that we've known each other for probably we said about 2003.
I don't think we actually landed on like the exact number.
Like,
Alicia and I got married in 2003.
Okay.
And we knew you before.
So it was a little bit earlier than that.
Call it.
Yeah, we
turn
could
of
say
the millennium.
02.
We
Yeah.
could go. I would say we could go the whole way back to 2000 almost, or 01, because you were around for September 11th. And
No, well, maybe I was.
I think you were.
No, I wasn't.
You weren't?
Not yet. I was a year after that.
All
I
right.
was a
Well,
year
in
after
that window then. So it's been a minute.
Wow. And so your capacity's through the roof. You've done a lot in your life already in this short time, just since I've known you. So Grove City. Did you work through college? I can't remember.
Yeah. I started working.
I just remember Ben with a huge high capacity all the time.
Well, I definitely stayed busy.
Yeah.
I mean, I started working the day I could get a job.
Yeah.
So
Where'd you work?
At 14, I started delivering papers in Butler. I'd walk
okay.
paper routes. And my dad would drive me, or my mom or my dad would drive me into downtown after school, and I'd pick up my load of papers and I'd walk and deliver papers. And then I worked at, a bunch of different places. But I worked the whole time, and then in college, I chose not to live on campus because I wanted to stay at the job I had and just wanted to be working.
Yeah, that's okay. So that's what I remember. Where were you working then?
In college, I was managing the movie theater in Butler.
Yeah, okay. So he's working. He's going to college, managing a movie theater.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's my
Why
lottery
is it the best job ever? That's cool.
That's my lottery job. Like
Lottery
if
job.
you ever win the
Yeah.
lottery, you didn't have to like.
Really?
Oh yeah.
Oh wow.
Okay. You go upstairs in the projection booth.
Okay.
It's dark. There's nobody else there. There's air conditioning, free popcorn, and you can watch any movie.
Seems like it fits you nice.
It was perfect.
All right. What was your favorite movie?
Oh, favorite movies. Favorite movie. It's really hard. Braveheart is good. Saving Private Ryan though is probably up there for me.
Yeah. So that was your job.
You know what I love about that movie,
Yeah.
Private Ryan? There's a line where the troops that Tom Hanks leading, they've been under battle, and they're trying to save this guy, and they're like, why are we saving this guy? Why is our mission all about this guy? That feels really selfish.
Yeah.
And Tom Hanks refocuses the whole platoon or whatever the unit is called, and he says to them, he's like, listen, that's not the mission. My mission's to get home to my wife, and if getting this kid back home to his family gets me back home to my wife, that's my mission.
Yeah.
And I love that refocusing, because doesn't life provide us a lot of opportunities to like look at the wrong thing and feel like that's the mission? But the mission's always kind of like a bigger picture than we tend to see in the most hard moments that we find ourselves in.
Yeah.
That's why, and for me, like that is so pivotal in that movie that I think it just speaks to like, it resonates with me.
Yeah. Well, that's good stuff, man. That's good stuff. So you were going to Grove City, and you were also Grovers think at a completely different level. You were problem solving 101 at Grove City is like, Geneva. I went to Geneva. No offense, Genevites watching this, but it's just a little different. It's like level 401 class.
Yeah. I would say this. I would say that, we can't keep doing movie references, but in The Sixth Sense, like the
Yeah.
whole punchline. If you haven't seen it by now, like
Yeah,
spoiler
I-
alert, but you've had 30 years.
Yeah,
so, like,
it's
sorry.
kind of your fault, right?
Right,
Yeah.
but at the end of the day, the kid goes, "I see dead people," and like that's the big secret that Bruce Willis was dead the whole
Yeah.
time. I see dead people. I always jokingly say like, "I see problems."
Yeah.
And
yeah.
so, to answer your question, like being at Grove City was cool for me because I felt like there were a lot of the classes were they didn't. Yes, they teach you concepts, but they teach you how to think.
Yeah.
And I felt like, wow, they helped me learn how to solve problems.
Yeah.
And that so resonated with me because I felt like I see things in that way, and so being able to connect that, like that.
Were you
was
always
the
that
joy. I don't know. I mean, I certainly growing up and working in different jobs, like it probably comes from that, right? But like
Yeah.
you're in a space and you're like, oh, there has to be an easier way, a faster way, a better way, a more productive way, a safer way, and you start to think that way, or I think that way, and not always having the opportunity to maybe make those types of improvements.
Does that
I've
come
always
like,
seen that.
Does that come with like competition with yourself? You like, I want to do this better, or does that come with you just like to?
No, I don't know
continue
how to
get
describe
better?
it. Like I think it can always be better. It's
Yeah.
like kind of like a driving force.
Yeah.
But you know, it was interesting. I was talking to my grandpa before he passed away. He had a stroke 2 years before he passed away. I mean, my man is resilient.
Yes.
He made it to 101
Yes.
and then passed away. But I remember Alicia and I were living in Florida when he had the stroke. So we were the closest family to him. And so
Yeah.
we were like, well, we're going to go up and check on him and spend some time with him. And we caught him in this incredibly lucid moment. He was telling stories about the family business and growing up in there and how he worked for his brother. And he started to kind of describe the same thing. He's like, yeah, anytime Frank, his brother, who was the president and CEO of the company, ran into something that was just a problem, he said, I always got called to come in and fix it. Like I just had this ability to jump in and fix problems.
Yeah.
And it was so cool because he's sitting there telling this. I'm connecting with him like, I get it. Like this is weird. Maybe there's like this genetic thing, like it's in the blood or in the genes, like that we have the same kind of gift in this.
Yeah.
And we left the hospital room and Alicia's like, we recorded it first of all because we're like, man, like I don't want to miss this conversation. But we left the hospital room and Alicia was like, I feel like you just had an interview with like the 70-year-old older version of yourself or something.
Wow.
And it was really, really special.
Yeah.
So I don't know like what am I born with, what just is circumstantial, like I keep stubbing my toe, there's got to be a better way. But
you spent a lot of time with your grandfather.
Yeah, definitely.
So you guys grew up kind of next to each other. You guys, I know you moved to Arkansas at one point and then came back. Did you guys build a house on that farm? And he was a neighbor? Or?
Yeah, he bought that farm in the 50s or 60s, moved my dad and my dad's brother out of Ben Avon, out of the city, and they grew up on the farm. And then we always lived in the area, and then when we moved back from Arkansas, we were in the Butler area, and then it was in my junior or senior year of high school, we built a house on the farm.
Oh, okay. And so did you see him basically every day? Like
we saw him a lot.
Yeah.
I like you just have. I just have so many memories of being out with my dad, Saturday haircuts, and hey, we're gonna swing by the farm and see grandma and grandpa real quick.
Yeah. So not every day, but
super
quite
regularly.
a bit.
Yeah. I mean, we would take fishing trips to Canada together.
Oh, yeah.
I remember them coming to visit us when we were in Arkansas. I mean, it's grandparent life, but certainly a strong connection.
Did you when you were growing up, did you want to be like your grandfather?
You know, it's interesting. My grandpa, like, I remember when I was younger thinking like, oh, like he's to the point. Like there's not a harshness, but like to the point.
He'll tell you the truth.
He's gonna tell you the truth.
Yeah.
Like you messed up on your math. He's like, all right. We went over this. You shouldn't have messed up.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't say like that was a part that, if there was anything, that would sometimes make me feel uncomfortable with him. But I think when I looked at his life, I mean, my goodness, he grew up middle of the Great Depression. He put himself through Carnegie Mellon. It was Carnegie Tech at the time.
Yeah.
While he was overnight working in the steel mill. So imagine going to that school, working full-time in the steel mill, and then his parents passed away young. So he and his older brother taking care of their sisters. Mm-hmm. I just remember thinking like, not that he worked hard. I mean, I certainly recognize like the work and the sacrifice.
Yeah.
I think I remember thinking like, it's really amazing the values that he has, like how much he loves his family. Like he'd do anything for them.
Right.
That's what I think, if anything, is probably the biggest piece of his legacy that I hope I embody. But certainly looking back at his life and being in moments of his life, I was just kind of a constant thought. I'm like, it's amazing to me. If I was over visiting my grandma when I was little, it was the middle of a work day. My grandpa would drive home, and he was busy. I mean, he was the chief operating officer at this company. He'd come home without fail every day for lunch, and he'd spend an hour at lunch with my grandma. They'd sit around the table, they'd catch up on their day, And I just remember that he didn't have to do that. He could have been way more productive if he'd have stayed at work and worked longer. But that connectedness and commitment to family was, man, he made a huge impact.
Is that his legacy then? Is that the legacy you want to carry on?
Yeah, I mean, I think
well,
he would. I don't know that he would. He certainly loved our family.
Yeah.
I think he actually would maybe dilute his legacy and say like, I worked hard, I sacrificed for family. I just think he was really good at loving the family. Like,
that's cool.
He always had a kind word for somebody. He always, if you walked in, I remember when Alicia first met him.
Yeah.
And to this day, we talked about Alicia's birthday was yesterday. And I said, is it weird not getting a call from Grandpa? She's like, it really is.
Wow.
Because every year he would call her. He just had a way of slowing down and making you feel like you were the most important person in the room when you had his attention. I think that's really special.
Well, that's what John Maxwell in 21 Indispensable Qualities of a Leader says. That is what charisma is. You walk away from a conversation not thinking that person's the brightest person in the room, but you walk away thinking you're the brightest person in the room because of the way they treated you.
Yeah.
That's true charisma.
Yeah.
Well, that's really cool.
Yeah, that sounds
well, I see that in you, Ben, though.
Oh,
thanks,
man.
You're doing a great job in that. That's for sure. And especially with the kiddos and with Lish, you really are. And you've made a lot of decisions to aim yourself to be there with your family. And the question actually started at the very beginning. I'm like, was this hard for you? Because you had such a high capacity, and I'm watching you slow down purposefully and still remain tremendously effective. You came out of an environment where you were working 60 hours a week by Wednesday, and now you have more flexibility and you're able to go out on the farm, which you wouldn't have been able to in prior seasons. I mean, even going back into college, like you busted it and you were working. Was this a dramatic shift for you being in this current season?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a different reality for sure. I mean, I remember, you're right. Like I worked and went to college and then we had that really crazy season where we planted a church.
Yes.
And while we were doing that, I was consulting
in San Francisco.
Los Angeles to Pittsburgh, writing sermons on the red eye. Like, don't recommend that type of life, but it seemed like the only way. So yeah, like it's always been busy. I think it's been sometimes you just feel like the children of Israel are like, they didn't learn lessons, so I take another lap around. I feel like that's been my life. Like I've had multiple opportunities to figure out this busyness thing and what's kind of at the root of that. Like what's the unhealth at the root of that. But I was reflecting back in a moment of clarity in a really hard season in our last assignment, just thinking about the busyness and that had been so much busyness had been so much a part of self-inflicted wounds. Like did this to myself, but starting to realize like I don't want to live like this the rest of my life. Like it's going to kill me. I'm going to die young.
Right.
And I remember back to when I applied out of college for my first job at a consulting company that I'd interned with. And they knew that there was a family business, and they kind of knew that even what I'd studied in school would just apply there. And the question they asked me in the interview, the president of the company asked me like, hey, why not just go work for the family business? And I remember saying to him, my exact answer was, I just want to prove to everybody I can do it on my own. And so that felt like a badge of honor in that moment. But fast forward a couple of decades in near burnout, and you're looking around at your life and you realize like, I'm not sure that's the badge of honor that I thought it was. And so, yeah, this season's super refreshing in that regard. But it's not just because there's less to do. It's because I think the Lord has done a work in my heart, and I feel less compelled to work for whether it was approval, satisfaction, personal needs and gain, like whatever those driving forces were, they just don't exist the way they used to. Right? So that's different, right? It's not just like, oh, I'm on a break and it'll pick back up.
Right.
It's like, I actually don't feel compelled to live that way anymore.
Yeah. Oh man, I know exactly what you're feeling. I know exactly what you're describing. You've done a good job in that transition. I remember even thinking the exact same thing. Like we would work so hard because we desired maybe to be noticed or to get some affirmation or whatever that is, and then we realize it's just like so fleeting.
Yeah.
When did that start to click for you? Like when did it? You just said, "This is killing me."
Yeah.
Was it health issues that predicated that?
Yeah, there was some of that. That collided at the same moment where you just start to, thankfully, it probably doesn't happen for everybody. For me, for whatever reason, and for all the circumstances, like you just start to have an awakening, and in those moments you start to see it everywhere, right? Yeah. Like all of a sudden you're like, my relationship with God simply amounts to what I need His help with at work. Yeah. To get through the day.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. Where you're only praying because God, I need your help here.
Right.
Which is the lowest base prayer that we can pray.
Right. Or you're like, where's my Bible? Because I have to teach something tomorrow.
Yes.
Like, wait, where did I put that?
Yes.
Like those are scary moments. They're sobering moments.
Yeah.
Scary is not the right, but they're
Yeah.
sobering. Like if
Yeah.
you kind of pause long enough,
Yeah.
or you're sitting at the table and you're having a conversation, and it's when normal dinner talk leads to one of your kids saying, "Oh, is all we ever talk about is your work?" I'm like, oh yeah, right.
Yeah.
There's just you have 4, 5, 6 of those in a short period of time, and all of a sudden you realize like, I've been saying this is a season, but it's a season that's lasted years.
Yeah.
Well, that's not a season. Seasons change. Seasons don't last years. Seasons last a few months.
Yeah.
And I think I just had this sobering moment where I'm like, I've been making excuses that this is a season that'll change, and it's not. Like I don't have this isn't a season. This is a problem, and it's me. Right.
Yeah. And I read something recently where a gentleman was just asking a question to guys like me, guys like you, we really love our family, but we're not afraid to work hard, and we're not afraid to like just go all in when we believe in something.
Yeah.
He said, don't you think your kids would rather you sacrifice the great vacation and just be with them whenever you're home and not have to pick up the emails? Don't you think that just rolling around on the floor with them and wrestling is more important than the destination you might be able to get to by working a little bit harder?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's been my experience for sure. I mean, if you would have asked me in those busiest of seasons, I would have thought my kids should understand that I'm there for them as much as I have with the capacity, time, bandwidth that I have. So to me, I felt like I was giving them everything I could, but that's a really selfish way of thinking of it because it considers me first. But when I actually slow down and consider them first, I'm not meeting the needs that they have.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah.
Like it's looking at it from the wrong perspective.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying I think we all can find ourselves there, but when your kids at the table are like, all we ever talk about is your work, where you start to realize like, I missed the play, I missed the game, I missed the whatever, and when you start to look back on a year and you're looking at family pictures and you realize like, I'm not in the family picture.
Ooh. Yeah.
Like that hits in a really, man, like in a sad way, like a powerful way.
Yeah.
So I'm just thankful that in the midst of all that, somehow the Lord opened my eyes to it, right?
Yeah. And Ben, you ran for years at a pace that I was like, how is he doing that? Mm-hmm. And that's what I think it is like with capacity. And I look up to that. I love that about you. But also as your friend, I'm like, hey man, like, you okay? And I'm so glad you are, you know, honestly. But okay, so you alluded, you started a church and you were also consulting.
Yeah.
And that was a pretty awesome consulting job. That was a pretty...
Yeah, it was fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that.
But starting a church is not easy. I did that before.
Yeah, right. We should talk about that.
It's not the easiest thing in the world, yeah. Don't flip the script. I get to ask you questions. So I don't want to talk about that trauma, baby.
Right.
No, it was great. It was great. It was wonderful. But, and it has been. But I do know how hard it is, and you have to be called to that. Now, a lot of people don't know we were in ministry together before that, and you were working, and we'd really built something great together. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And we led a lot of people to Christ together.
Yeah.
That was like fun seasons.
Yeah, I think we're actually officially old enough that we can look back and say that was the good old days, right? That was the heyday. Almost.
It was, man. It was so fun. We didn't have too much responsibilities. Like, Dee wasn't even born yet, and then when she was, it was
simpler times.
Yeah. And man, those are fun times. And then God calls you to start a church, and can you just tell people like what happened there? Like, what was God stirring in your heart?
I mean, capacity is a funny thing, right?
Yeah.
Because like with every gift, there's a basement and a balcony to it.
Okay.
So the balcony is the good side. The upside is like, man, you can accomplish a lot. And we live in a world that rewards that type of behavior. But it's kind of like asking an alcoholic to live above a bar. And so whether it was the consulting years, the consulting plus church planning, or the season after that, like, man, we just live in a culture that feeds that. And so the basement side of that is, the self-destruction that it causes, whether it's physical, emotional, spiritual health. It all degrades and erodes over time. Like, we're just not meant to operate at that pace.
Yeah.
But the balcony side of capacity leads you to believe like you can do anything. And so feeling called to plant a church, like there was just never a thought in my mind when the Lord started to stir that in us, and whenever it was 2009, 2010, like that we wouldn't be able to just do that, and like we'll just whatever it takes to make it work. And we're blue collar, gritty, like whatever, so we'll get it done. And so we just kind of launched headfirst into it. And we've talked about this before, but like success in life is obedience to God. We felt
Yep.
called to it, so we're going to step out into this. And, it was a fun journey. We tried to do it in an honoring way and learned a little bit.
Yeah.
Helped Pastor Larry launch his church. And so, 2012, we launched a church. And it's funny, I don't know if you've ever done this, but, God simply said, plant a church, and gave us this vision for it. And, like, you ever get a vision from God and then like accessorize it with all of your expectations?
Yes,
You know what I mean?
yes,
Like all he
yes,
said was this.
yeah.
But I'm like, but it's going to be the fastest and
I've
by
done that
this
once or
and the
twice.
budget.
Yeah.
Like, you start to bolt on, you start to bolt on all those expectations, and
Mm-hmm.
then you get into it and you realize like, this is really hard and I actually don't know a whole lot about what I'm doing. And so all this responsibility comes crashing in.
Isn't that so funny? Like we think we know going into it, and then we get into it and we have absolutely no idea. I'm just glad that I'm not the only one.
Oh,
I was
yeah.
thinking that. That's why I want to post like a lot on Facebook about like what people should be doing, because I'm like, I just don't really know anything.
Right. I know a lot less than I think. Anything I do know is from the pain of doing it wrong when I
Yeah.
thought I knew what I was doing.
Right. And then when you're like, oh, you should do this, like people are doing this because they're led by God to do it this way.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
truth is always like somewhere in the middle.
Right.
You just liberated me, Ben. You just
there
helped
you
me
go.
out. I know I'm not the only one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, pride and insecurity are opposite sides of the same coin. So I probably had a lot of both going on.
Yeah,
in that
I mean
season, right?
that's what we do. Yeah.
Right. So insecurity, you compensate for it with your strengths, and then the pride side of it, like man, most of us are blind to it. So
Yeah.
I'm sure we walked into that season with all kinds of both, and
Sure.
it's one of those things where it's like church planting is, on one hand, the most exciting and rewarding and fulfilling thing you could, and you know this,
Yeah.
that you could ever do.
Yeah.
And is also somehow equally the most painful, hard, difficult, challenging thing that you could ever do.
Yeah.
And to live in a reality where both are true, but you have this vision or this calling from God, but you bolted on expectations. Like that's just for me, that was a recipe for disaster. And it was a super humbling season when 3 years later, we ended up closing the church. And I think the Lord was in that as much as he was in us opening it. And if the whole thing was ultimately only about some of the things God needed to, some of the ugliness he needed to kind of sort out in my heart, then I'm thankful for it. I'm also thankful that God's way more efficient than needing to do all of that just to work on this.
Yeah.
So I'm sure there was good things that happened and lives that were changed, and we celebrate
Of course,
all that,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
But it was, man, it was all that. It was a great season. It was a really, really hard season. But
Yeah.
it was a setup season too, and God's always doing that. Like,
Yeah.
And if anything, like, man, I haven't learned a lot, but one of the things we tell our kids, and man, when I get the chance to talk to younger people who are even in their 20s, I always just tell them, I'm like, listen, you have no idea how God's using this decade of your life to create a resume for you that you don't even know you need, and you won't know for 10 years.
Right.
So just trust him in that process. And I wish if I could go back and tell like the 22-year-old version of Ben getting out of college, starting this career, feeling called to ministry, but launching out into the business world, that's what I tell him. It's like, you have no idea. Like, I get it. There's hopes and dreams in your hearts, and yes, move in that direction. But don't shortcut the process of the path that he wants to take you on to get there. I never could have created the journey that he's put us on, but I'm so thankful for every moment of it, even the hard parts, maybe even especially the hard parts, because it's really set us up to be able to, not even set us up, but I just feel like it's put us in a position to be able to be more effective in the things that he actually put in our hands to.
Yeah. So when you talk about success, and then I'm gonna have a pivot question for you after this, but when you talk about success, you said it's doing what God told you to do.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people have a theology of if God tells me to do it, then it's going to be successful in the eyes of the world, and it's going to be successful in the eyes of, and everybody's going to validate it. Everybody's going to feel like everybody's going to support me. Everybody's going to see God. What do you say to somebody who's walking into a season? Two sides of this. The person who might be walking into the season, or the person who genuinely felt called by God to do something, and in the eyes of everyone else, it hasn't succeeded. Like, can you encourage somebody?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think that we don't have to look much further than the Bible to realize that obeying God often comes with more road bumps, speed bumps. Maybe even like
I really wish that wasn't true.
Right, but but like,
why can't it be easier?
Right. But I agree. But then I had this moment where I'm like, we would all say that we want. How do you want your story to? Would it fit into the Bible, or would it stand out from the Bible? Right. And we all dream of a story that would actually stand out and not fit in. And so I think like ultimately, if you look at our relationship with God, like. And it took me a lot of years to get this right. But ultimately, he's only ever leading us to places where we need him more, not less. Which is different than what we do in natural parenting, right? We want our kids to grow up to be independent. Well, God wants us to grow up to be dependent. And so it would make sense that he's only going to lead us to places where we need him more. And we don't need him more in the moments where everything's going good. We need him more in the moments where it's going bad, because we realize that at the end of ourselves, we find him in a new way.
Yes.
And so it's in those moments that you actually draw closer to God if we don't waste them. And so I think for the person that's venturing out in I've got this big dream and vision in my heart, great, go after it. But I don't think it should be as smooth as you want it to be, because you're going to miss the best parts of it. Because the best parts of it aren't what you accomplish for him. It's how close you grow to him.
Yeah.
And that only happens in the moments of dependence. I think this is only ever leading us to a place where we need him more,
And
not less.
sometimes in the success of the world, that's what we miss.
Right.
We miss that intimacy with God because we're so busy upholding the look of everything. I don't know if that's too honest or not.
Yeah. No, I think that's probably exactly right.
Yeah.
Right? Like, because we've just got it all mixed up. We think success is about outcomes, and it's not. It's about obedience. And so if you actually have this belief inside your heart that success is about outcomes, you're going to spend a lot of energy trying to create outcomes that look like success in the world's eyes.
Yeah.
And so if anything, maybe that's what I got wrong so much coming out of high school and college and pursuing the career and, you know, the home and the cars. Like, you start to work for outcomes that look like success.
Yeah.
And you realize, like, there's this dichotomy, like, man, like, that's actually not going to lead to the place of fulfillment that just relationship with the Heavenly Father is going to take you to.
Wow.
Because it's different.
Yeah. Ben, that's a little bit more profound than you might think. You know, the big house isn't really success.
Yeah. I mean, that's been my experience. Maybe it is for somebody.
Yeah.
But man, like, Jesus said, like, what good is it if a man gains the whole world, but he forfeits his soul in the process, right?
Yes.
And so he's not talking about the person who gets it all and dies and goes to hell. He's not talking about an eternal destination. He's talking about a heart condition.
Yes.
He's saying, what good is it if you achieve all this outward stuff, but on the inside it's all eroded and you're empty at a soul level?
Yeah.
And I think, again, like, you don't learn that except through the painful experience of violating that.
Yeah.
And that's the way the kingdom works. It's just like science, right? There are scientific principles. You don't have to like it, but they're real no matter what. Like, you don't have to like gravity, but you can't avoid it.
Yeah.
Well, the kingdom's the same way. There's these kingdom principles, and when you actually slow down and read them, you can try and spar against them and buck them, but at some point, you're going to be held accountable to them, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And the sooner I've found that you yield and submit to this upside-down kingdom that Jesus came and launched, not that it gets easier or better, but there's a peace that comes with it.
Yeah.
Like, there's a fulfillment, a connection.
It's so true, and we both felt that in so many different seasons. But, okay, so you said that you were 22 years old. You had felt called to ministry.
Yeah.
When did you know? Like, how did you know? Like, first, how did you even come to God? And then, how did you know, like, at 22, I feel called to ministry?
Well, I mean, I grew up in a Christian home, going to Christian school. So I gave my heart to Jesus at, like, it was kindergarten or first grade.
Yeah.
Basement of an old Baptist church that had a little Christian elementary school in it. So
Did you have to give up all your rock and roll music at that time, or?
I did, yeah. I burnt all my AC/DC CDs in kindergarten. So we had I always tell people, like, when we go this far back to tell the story, I always tell people, like, I don't have a season of my life where I ran from God. Wow. Like, I don't have that's not a part of my story.
Yeah.
But I had a really long extended season of not really understanding what a relationship with him looked like.
Yeah.
Like, I got the eternity thing figured out. Like, there was enough conceptual understanding there to know, like, man, I need Jesus at that level.
Yeah.
It took me a lot more years to understand than I needed him at a daily level.
Yeah.
Right? It wasn't just at an end of days level. I needed him on a daily level.
Yeah.
And so that all kind of happened in high school for me, going to a Christian school, and a friend of mine invited me to his youth group.
Yeah.
And it was Pastor Larry Bentoncourt's youth group, and
the man who changed so many lives, yet nobody knows.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, and I think he prefers it that way.
I agree with you.
He's so humble.
Yeah.
And I'm so thankful for him. We all are. That have been touched by his life. But I mean, it was that senior year going to Pastor Larry's youth group where I started, like, there was this awakening inside of me.
Oh, that's cool.
Like, God wants to have a relationship with you. Because Pastor Larry, I remember him always saying two things. God loves you, and he has a plan for you.
Yes.
And that sounds now, like, I've heard it so many times, it feels so elementary. It felt so foreign to me.
Yeah.
Because that speaks to relationship. This love and this idea of greater purpose and destiny. Like, all of a sudden my life had meaning, although it was still foggy. Just that awakening was so instantaneous. It's like, oh my gosh. Like, my life, like, it's not, I'm just not just going to go day to day until I die. Like, there's some great sense of purpose.
Was there a moment for you that purpose opened up, or the way you're describing it sounds gradual?
It was super gradual.
Yeah.
I always say, like, I I always say. I don't get to say it a lot. So in my mind, I
always say to myself.
I always say in my mind, there's only one burning bush story in the Bible.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of stories in the Bible where you see these people in a process.
Yeah.
Right? Like most overnight success stories in the Bible are 30 years in the making. That's certainly true of Jesus. And like Joseph and, the whole deal with this coat, like I feel like that's mostly been my story. Like it's been more a process of development, right? Like you just kind of grow into it. Like, okay, all of a sudden I understand I have purpose. So when you start to grasp this idea that you have purpose, that there's some greater sense of meaning to your life, well, for a guy like me, my next question is, well, how do I find that?
Yeah.
So you dive into a relationship with God. And as I did that and just stayed connected, like I remember one day somebody's like, hey, could you help with this at church? And that felt right. And so you dive into that. And I remember being a senior and thinking, where am I going to go to school? Like, I'm like, maybe I'll go to the Air Force Academy, or just really just shooting from the hip, like throwing darts on the wall. And I don't know how he did it or what. I remember feeling in my heart like, hey, I got plans for you that you know nothing of. Was kind of like what stuck in my heart.
Yeah.
And it took me back to a moment that I hadn't thought of. So that's in my senior year. Well, 5 years previously in 7th grade, I remember me and my dad, we were sitting up. He was working on my computer in my bedroom. Yeah. Probably like installing some new game for me. And I was watching the Pittsburgh Pirates play the Chicago Cubs on my little TV in there. And, Harry Carey's the announcer back then. I'm sitting, I don't know if I've ever told you this story.
No, you haven't.
You're either going to be like,
I'm leaning in,
cut
I'm
the
excited.
tape. You're going to be like, cut the tape, this is crazy. Or you're going to be
sure
like,
it's
oh
gonna
my
be
gosh.
perfect.
So I'm sitting in there and I'm watching TV. My dad's, so he's sitting there right, the point of him being there is that he's in the room with me.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there watching TV and I'm watching the game. And I heard this audible voice. And all it said was, I'm coming again soon. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, who? Like what? Yeah. What does this mean? And so I think in my mind, as I remember it, I kind of like, wait, what? That's what I said. Yeah. And then it was just this idea of like, I'm coming again soon. And then more softly, it was like this idea of what are you gonna do with that? And it felt like this big challenge. And I remember asking my dad, I'm like, Dad, did you hear what they just said on TV? And he's like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, we had this whole conversation. I said, Dad, this is what I just heard. And he's like, I don't know what to make of that. Like maybe God just spoke to you. Wow. And in my mind, it sounded loud. Yes. But he didn't hear anything. So I always was it in my ears? Was it in my heart? I don't know. But as a 7th grade boy, it was just kind of this moment, like, while I was still figuring out, like, I had no concept of this idea of God wanting to have a relationship with me. There was this moment where he just loved me enough to be like, hey, like, he's got my attention. Yes. And then he was super patient for 4 more years for me to get invited to that youth group. And then it was kind of the next step in the process of like, okay, I've got plans for you that you know nothing of. I'm going to use you in ways you didn't think. Wow. And so it's just been kind of that evolution. So I went to, but you hear these things from God. And once again, I did it. So, God has a plan for my life. That must mean ministry. So all of a sudden, I'm a senior in high school thinking about what Bible school am I going to go to? And every door just either literally closed or I just didn't feel right. And so I'm like, well, I guess I'll just go to normal college and get a business degree. And that felt right. So I went down that path. But it led me on this path of like, for years, feeling called to ministry, but life moving in this direction of the marketplace and business, they felt like paths that were divergent, like they would never connect. And so that's what I mean when I talk about this idea of like, you just have no idea how God is creating a resume for you that you don't know you need. I didn't know I needed 10 or 15 years in the marketplace to gather some business experience and get exposed to some bigger organizations and just understand how organizations work and sometimes how they don't work. And I didn't know that that would somehow transpose into kingdom and church work and be able to add value there. But God did. Yeah. And so it's just been this really, really sometimes painstakingly slow journey of like, how in the world does this and this ever connect? But one day, God started, like, you don't even know he's bringing them together because he doesn't see them this way. Yeah. Like, I think sometimes we think God's like, we make mistakes or decisions and somehow God has to divert to his plan B. I just don't think he has a plan B. Yeah. He's always working things out to his purposes, right? Yeah. And so it never was like this. That was something I created in my heart. And it made me bitter and angry, like, God, you called me into ministry, but I'm going in this. I could get angry with God about it. But eventually
I'm sure a lot of people can resonate, honestly.
Yeah. I would think so. I hope I'm not the only one.
No, there's so many people that I've come in contact with or who've reached out to me. They're like, I've felt a call my whole life. I don't know how to process that. Yeah. I'm successful in these areas, in these arenas. And I think as in the church world, we've done a little bit of a disservice by saying everybody needs to be in fivefold ministry employed by the church. Right? That's not the call for everyone, but I'm thankful it's a call for you.
Yeah, me too.
Like, for real.
It's a lot of fun.
For real. You go to Grove City, you're working 2 jobs, you're working a job while you're finishing school up, you get out, you get a job in a consulting company, and you're serving in ministry with Pastor Larry. It was about 2007. I was like, hey, Ben, I get to take over this 20-something ministry.
I remember the conversation.
You were the first person that I recruited. You were it.
That's
you were
right.
it. I was like, Ben Rath, where is he? We had a lot of fun together, and then God calls you to start a church, and you were obedient. God also calls you to close the doors to that. And by the way, I do look at that season as your friend. I'm like, man, I wish that I could have experienced that more. I wish I could have gone to church there with you. And you know what I mean? Like,
you had a Sunday
that would have
job
been fun. Yeah, that would have been a lot of fun. I always had this longing in my heart though to just not just be in relationship, but be doing kingdom work together.
Yeah.
And it's been super cool. It's been just very redeeming for me in this season. Anyways, so God calls you to close that chapter. The next season of your life, you worked at a really thriving church in Florida.
Yeah.
Was that hard to move from Pittsburgh to Florida, by the way, or was it pretty awesome? Or
I remember when we decided we were going to move and we started to tell people, we were like, wait, you're moving? Like, people don't leave Pittsburgh, right?
Right.
It's kind of has a gravitational pull to it. People tend to stay.
Are there even Steelers games there?
Right, exactly. Well, somebody was like, how are you going to move? I'm like, well, put everything in a box. So literally.
Really?
They meant emotionally, how are you going to detach from here? But oh, I can walk you through the process. I know exactly how you move.
Yeah.
I mean, it was challenging. It's always hard, right? At that point, we had all 3 kids.
How old were the kids then?
Oh, you're going to make me do backwards math.
Well, D was probably 10.
We were there for 4.5 years.
Okay.
We moved back, a year and a half ago. So call that 6 years ago. So Danica was 9.
9, okay.
9 or 10, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and then back up 2 from there, and that's Landon, and 2 from there is Ariana. So Ariana's real little.
Now, what do you know? They're spaced out perfectly.
We got to Florida.
I would predict that with you.
And it was windy, and the palm trees were blowing.
Yeah.
And Ariana would not walk outside. She was afraid of the windy palm trees. I'm like, this is going to be a long assignment. She won't go outside.
Oh, wow.
I had to carry her into restaurants.
Yeah.
And I think I know now, it wasn't the palm trees and the wind. It was the overall trauma of the whole thing. And Right, so it's different. But it was really funny for us. We're like, what are we going to do? There's nowhere we can go where there's not palm trees.
Yeah.
There's 400 species of palm trees.
She's so sweet, man.
Yeah.
She's such a sweetheart.
But it was hard. It's hard to uproot your family and move the kids. And it's hard. But again, it's those greater dependence moments. Okay, Lord, we heard you clearly, so it's hard. It's uncomfortable.
What was the biggest lesson you learned in that season?
Being down there?
Yeah.
Oh, man. I learned Pastor Angela's message this past weekend.
Yeah.
The whole idea of the root and the fruit and the kingdom within, and how often we want to kind of look at the circumstances without and at the neglect of actually looking within. And okay, what's wrong in here?
Yes.
Because this actually drives not just perspective out here, but it actually changes the reality of what's kingdom outside. That idea of, call it soul health, call it self-care, call it self-awareness, call it emotional well-being, call it whatever you want, and there's kind of interconnectedness, all that. But just that reality of really being, and not because I've done this well or perfectly, but being really in tune when I'm not okay. Something's not right in here.
Yeah.
And rather than working through it or driving past it or looking around it or moving around it like I did for a lot of years of stressful, traumatic seasons.
Yeah.
Okay. This is more, what's going on here is way more important than what's going on out here.
So you're telling me that a man can take a soul inventory and make sure he's healthy on the inside?
Yeah.
Really?
And not only can, but I think you have to.
Yeah.
Because Jesus said, what good is it if you gain everything else, but that perishes?
Wow.
You lose that erodes.
So
if your operating system malfunctions, what's the point?
Where do you even start with that soul check? How do you even start?
Well, I think the good thing is that we do have all those indicators. And so I think the biggest indicator is unhealthy emotion. Mm-hmm. And so for me, and we were talking about this in our Church Anywhere group on Sunday, I said, I know unhealthy emotion, and I just try and stay in tune to when it's happening. So when I am responding in ways that the situation doesn't warrant. That's a good way to describe it. Hey, this was a level 1 offense and I'm at a level 10 response. That's a pretty good indicator.
It happens.
Some stuff is off, right?
Yeah,
I'm not talking about just in a singular moment,
Yep.
oh, okay, bad judgment. I'm talking about no, like the homework
Yeah.
wasn't done and you're at a 10 in terms of responding to it. Like when you
Yes.
start to take it out on the people you love the most, that's
Yeah.
exactly what Angela's talking about, right?
Yes,
You're
yes,
like,
yes,
I'm
yes.
avoiding what's in here, and I think that I'm upset about the homework not being done. It has
Yeah.
nothing to do with the homework.
Right.
That is only pushing on what is undone in here.
Yeah.
And so that idea of an emotional inventory is super important.
Yeah.
Right? And I think like the filter I use, and man, whether it was church planning, whether it was career building, whether it was the season, the assignment in Florida, even when it's here, I think it's as simple as, I'm not saying it's not a painful or hard process to work through, but it's diagnostically, to me, it's simple. I have an expectation and reality is here, and the space in between is hurt. And
Yeah.
you can start to dig into hurt and figure out whatever word it is, but there's pain associated with that.
Yeah.
So the idea of unmet expectations to me is, like, again, it's a diagnostic. I think it matters.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
So
it happens every day.
So here we have a hunter with a beard and a really cool hat saying, I experience pain and I have to deal with that pain.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
I don't
Where do you
even-
think that comes from?
I don't even think it's optional. Like, I think it's oxygen. Like,
Yeah.
it's essential,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like, how can you? And again, this is a version of Ben that has grown in this space, so I can say it like this. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know how you can't, yet I did for a whole bunch of years.
Yeah.
But man, I think, don't we all kind of grew up with? And I had a great childhood, by the
Yeah.
way. I got great parents, great family. I mean, I've told some of the story. But life hurts. So there's
Yeah.
trauma in all of us. And when we don't know how to process that well, our body and our minds, like our emotion, like we cope. We learn survival tactics.
Yes.
And those become learned behaviors.
Yes.
And so, but it's ultimately to the destruction of ourselves and our soul.
Yeah.
And I think that's the gift of, I think what a lot of the body of Christ is learning right now. Like we've been all spirit and kind of ignored the soul. And it's a three-legged stool, body, soul, and spirit, and they all work together. And when you focus on one without the other two, that's a wobbly stool.
Yes.
And I think we're starting to get that right.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So how does somebody start though? Once you start to take the inventory, what's your first step?
Oh, I don't know that I've laid it out in kind of steps and processes, but you can do anything.
I know what you did though.
Well, you answer the question. I think you can do anything with a little bit of self-awareness. Like
Yeah.
that's baseline.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of us have a lot less of that than we want. Interesting though, Harvard Business Review did an article, and I'm not trying to divert from your question. We can come back to it. I just don't have an answer.
Well, I will answer that
You answer
because
your
I watched
question.
you in
But
that
listen
season.
to this fun fact.
Yeah, I'm ready.
Harvard Business Review did a study of Fortune 500 companies,
Mm-hmm.
and they analyzed some of the best companies in the country. And the leaders of those companies said that the most desirable trait that they're looking for in people who they believe can be future high-level leaders, C-level executives, is self-awareness.
Wow.
Isn't that fascinating?
Wow.
Like corporate
Yeah.
America's got it right. Now they want to monetize it. They don't actually care about the person, but they recognize
Yeah.
that it speaks to healthy culture and somebody who can make it for the long haul.
Wow.
In other words, the person who's not self-aware enough to deal with what's going on, burn out, crash out, create catastrophes, like the Me Too movement, like however it manifests. The eroded soul is a car without a steering wheel. And that's what Jesus is saying. What good is it if you get all of this, but you end up driving the car off a cliff?
Wow. Wow. That's good. That's really good. Here's what you did in that season. You ready for it?
Yes.
Drum roll.
Yeah, help me out.
You gave me a call.
I did.
You gave Pastor Larry a call.
Yeah, that's right.
You opened your heart up. You just said, hey, it wasn't that you had anything that was like, it's normal stuff. But
Yeah.
you started to take an inventory and you started to realize, hey, I just need you to pray for me.
Right.
And I think as men,
That's hard.
it really is.
It's not natural.
No, it's not,
Yeah.
But I was really, I remember in that season, I just felt so honored that you would have picked up the phone and called,
Yeah.
And I know there were probably 3 or 4 people that I don't know that you probably called during that time
Yeah.
too. But I saw you make the call. I saw you talk to people.
Well, man, I was so thankful to have you guys in that season. I mean,
Yeah.
it was really, really challenging in so many regards. And I remember being, I had driven to Georgia to do like a 2 or 3 day kind of silence and solitude retreat, just trying I got to get recalibrated here. Like it was all out of whack. And I remember day 1 or day 2 just sitting at my campfire and sitting in a chair and journaling and kind of writing like what all is going on. And man, like you can only process so far on your own, and at some point you need somebody else. Like we always say, like in the church world, life wasn't meant to be lived alone. That's more than cliche. I mean, Paul talks about that, right? He talks about how God will use the hard things that we go through to help other people who are going through the same hard things.
Right.
Like you literally cannot, you were not made, is not the way the kingdom was designed to work, that you get through the hardest moments alone.
Yeah.
And I think if you actually believe what Paul said is true, that there's somebody out there who has experienced similar enough pain that they're not perfect, but they're a step ahead of you and where you're at. Well, all of a sudden you've availed yourself to a tour guide can help you navigate really what seems really scary. Yeah. And very much like, oh, I'm the only one. Well, no, all of a sudden you recognize there's other people going through the same thing. Yeah. And they can help walk you through it. And so I remember sitting there at that campsite journaling, and your name is in a page of my journal. It literally, the Lord told me to do 4 things. And one of them was, it said, call Zack and Lauren. Yeah. So I'm all that to say, I'm not sure I knew to call you, but the Lord spoke it. And when I did, I learned over the journey of it, oh, this is how that scripture becomes real in my life. And those are the best moments, when God becomes real in those ways, when what you're seeing in scripture plays out in your context. Right. And that was a moment like that for me.
Well, I'm honored that God would have counted us worthy to receive that call, because, the worst thing that we can do in those moments is call somebody who hasn't healed from, or who is in a similar circumstance, or, somebody, and now we just relate off of each other's
Well, there's a word for that, right?
It's called gossip, right?
Commiserate.
Yeah. Commiserate,
I'm going to find somebody to be miserable with.
Yes.
I'm going to commiserate with them.
Yes.
And I'm sure I've done that a lot too. Right?
We all have.
We all have.
Yeah.
But that's the better
Sometimes
way.
it feels real nice to do it too, by the way.
And I think it is.
Probably should stop
that. It can be
Zack,
particularly fulfilling in moments, in my worst of moments, for sure. But man, I would encourage that person who's in that situation, just the way God spoke to me. I didn't even know what to ask for. So you have a head start person that's feeling like this is resonating with that person. Like whoever's out there hearing this and it's resonating, like you have a head start. I didn't even know to ask the question. Yeah. Ask God the question, like, who in my life God has been strategically positioned to walk with me through this? Yes. And then open your heart to
That's really great.
Right? Like, isn't that such a good question?
Oh, yeah.
Because it's a question of faith. Because you're believing, it comes from a foundation of faith. I'm believing that God doesn't want me to walk through this alone. There's potentially a person or two who he wants to use to help walk me through that. Yes. And that's the efficiency of the kingdom of God. Like it lifts your life, but it's also so fulfilling for the person who gets to, you said it was an honor to walk with me through that. Yeah. Right. Because you're seeing the redemption of what was painful for you and in the way it's helping to help me. Yeah. Like that's the efficiency of God. Like, he just doesn't waste anything.
It's funny because the scriptures say that we can comfort others with the comfort that we've received from the Holy Spirit. Right. It was funny in my season, I reached out to Rod. Mm-hmm. There's no, and in my world, and there's nothing overwhelmingly negative. Just we all get in these seasons where we don't know upside down, up from down. Yeah. And we're like, wait a second. We need friends in our life. We need people in our life who can tell us what time it is. Right. Not just say, oh yeah, I've been there. But like I remember Rod correcting me in a couple thoughts. And I'm like, man, I really needed that. Yeah. Because I didn't know a truth from a lie in that season. Yep. And his ability, I don't want to hear the truth sometimes.
That's a different story.
You know what I mean? Like, come on, would you just commiserate? It's a great word for it. So
right. Just tell me
I'm really proud of
really
proud of the growth that you've exuded. You've walked through a lot. You've been through a lot. You've walked through a lot. You felt a lot. You can clearly articulate it. And I'm confident in this next season that God's going to use you to continue to help and heal other people through the same thing. Yeah. Like for real, man. Like you do a great job.
I appreciate it.
So what does this new season for you kind of look like? Like what fuels Ben Rath? What gets you excited in the morning when it comes to the things of God?
I think it's fun to be in a season where there is, life has many aspects. Mm-hmm. I think it's fun to be in a season where the many aspects of life all have joy in them. Yeah. And it's not just all about one. But I don't call that balance because I just don't love that word of balance. Yeah. That to me feels like there's not enough to go around and you got to even it out. I don't think that's the abundant life that Jesus talked about in John 10:10. Like when multiple aspects of life feel really fun and full, I think that's so good. It's so energizing. So family feels so full. Alicia and I's marriage and relationship after all these, it feels so full. Yeah. And having a special connection with each of my kids and a true unique personal relationship with each of them, that's so full. Yeah. And then to be able to sit around a table like we did today with coworkers, not that I haven't had this in the past, like past assignments, I've had tons of friends at work, but like there's richness there to sit around a table and feel like I get to go make a difference for the kingdom with people I love. Like, that's really fun.
Yeah.
And to be able to slow down with people, and whether it's church anywhere group or being at church on a Sunday, and like hopefully being that tour guide for them, it's just one step ahead, not perfect, but able to help. Like, there's fulfillment in that. So it's there's not a simple one thing answer to that question. I just feel so full in so many areas. But
are you in the family pictures now?
Yeah, we're overdue for something. Yeah.
But when it's fun for me to see you going to the Steelers games, and you know,
we made it a point. Alicia and I have been like kind of switching off who goes and who you know, which one of us takes a kid, basically is what I'm trying to say. But we committed, like, we're gonna get a picture from every game, because it's a really fun season to do something from start to finish.
That's cool.
And have a memory of it. Like, that's really been fun.
It's God's healed you, and he's really reversed some things.
Yeah. Well, and you know, healing's an interesting thing. Like, it is progressive, right? Like,
right.
I was talking to somebody the other day, and I said, if you're striving for some destination where it's all over and you never think of it again, I'm not sure that reality exists. But if you're willing to believe that sanctification simply means every day just looking a little bit more like Jesus, like moving in that direction, then you can really embrace the process of healing from pain and hurt and self-inflicted or otherwise in life. That it's just this journey of becoming more like him and allowing him to do progressive work. Like, that just takes so much pressure off.
Yeah.
Because when I think there's a day where it's all better and I never think about it again, you end up striving for that as a destination. You just start striving again, right? You just try and get there. Oh, I just want to get there, because that's like, there's some, it's just not, it's a mirage in a desert. I'm telling you, in my opinion, that doesn't exist. Like, I have this scar on my hand from when I dated Amanda McHugh in 10th or 11th grade, and we went ice skating. And I got down on the ice to like make a snowball to throw at her, and she saw what I was going to do, and she kicked my hand with her skate, and it cut me.
Oh.
And but I still have the scar.
Yeah.
The wound is cleared up. It's not open. It's not bleeding anymore. But the scar is a reminder.
Did you put her
the
full
process.
name out there on purpose?
Huh? I don't know. She might be married. We got really smart people. They can edit that.
I'm just kidding.
It's just funny to tell the story with a lot of color commentary. The more detail, the better.
Yeah.
This isn't about Amanda. It's about scars. I think that healing is progressive. This probably looks a little bit better. Most of the healing is done. But the scar reminds us of the goodness of God in some ways.
It's true.
So in some ways, I actually, because then wouldn't full healing mean I don't actually remember the hardest parts of church planning at all? Like, it's gone from my mind.
Yeah.
I actually don't want that, because then I can't actually do what Paul taught, which is he can't use that for somebody else. So
Even
healing
Jesus,
is a process.
Yeah,
I don't think it's a destination. And so for me, like, that just takes so much pressure off, man.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not arrived. Like, there's still days where things from a whatever story or memory, like, it triggers me, and I'm like, I can't believe that's still in there. But the process of working through that is the process of just becoming a little bit more like Jesus.
Yeah, and all those difficult times that we go through, they're simply, God is allowing us to go through those times to determine our values.
100%.
This is who I'm calling you to be, and this is who I'm molding you in. And it's not always good and bad, right or wrong.
Right.
This is who God's called me to be.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
Yep.
Like, it's okay. When you said that about scars, I think about Jesus. You know, he appears behind closed doors, and he says, Thomas, go ahead. Put your fingers into my scars. So Jesus' resurrected body still has scars.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to do a quick lightning round to end this, okay?
Oh, man.
You ready? Okay. Favorite book of all time?
Chasing Daylight, Erwin McManus.
Ooh. That's a good one.
It's a great book.
Yeah, definitely get it. What's it about again?
It is essentially the story of Jonathan and his armor bearer.
Okay.
And when they went to attack the Philistines, when it was essentially Saul's job to do that. And it just speaks to these components of faith that, at least in my experience and upbringing, that's not to fault anybody or anything, it just was, it was absent in a lot of my faith upbringing.
Yeah.
This idea of, like, that we go for it, like this kingdom mentality, like we're actually conquerors, like we can do these things. And so it to me, and that story, Landon's middle name is Jonathan, because of that book and that story.
That's cool.
It's about Jonathan's armor bearer.
So
and
Chasing
the courage that Jonathan showed, man, like, I love it.
I need to pick that book up again.
It's so
that sounds
good.
good. Okay.
So
okay. Best podcast that you listen to?
Man, I still have this thing where podcasts to me feel a little bit like work, and so I've been on a podcast vacation.
Yeah, well, that's fine.
Yeah.
That's fine.
I will answer. That's not entirely true. Okay, I'll answer it, but it's probably not in the direction you're expecting.
Yeah.
There's a podcast called Wired to Hunt. It's a guy named Mark Kenyon.
Perfect.
Who's a hunter out of Michigan. He's an
That's
archery
exactly
hunter.
what I'm expecting.
See, I thought you said like
Hunt?
Wired to Hunt.
Wired to Hunt.
Yeah. I mean, he's so thoughtful and methodical about the way he hunts.
Yeah.
I love it. I've learned more from Mark Kenyon about hunting than any other hunter.
Oh, man.
Yep.
Okay, bucket list destination for you to go to.
All right. If Alicia's listening, it's Bora Bora. If it's Ben, if it's just me,
Yeah.
man, I want to go on a backpack hunting trip to Alaska that is combination
picture something.
grizzly bear and caribou. To me, that would
Well, I would shoot a grizzly bear from like a mile away. You can't catch me. You can't catch me within 10 feet of a grizzly.
Yeah,
No
you got to
way.
be careful.
Yeah, definitely.
That's a real
Okay,
bear. These
yeah.
little black bears are nothing.
Are you afraid of any animal?
I hate snakes.
Snakes?
I can't watch
Really?
snakes on TV without my hands getting clammy and wet.
Okay, so no snakes on a plane. That
No,
I was
wouldn't even
surprised
watch
that
it.
wasn't your favorite movie.
Wouldn't even watch it.
Okay.
Yeah, couldn't watch it if I wanted to. Yeah.
Yeah. One thing about Danica that you love.
Oh my gosh, she's so confident.
Yeah.
She's confident's not the right word because that speaks to maybe ego. I don't mean that. She's so secure.
Yes.
She's so secure in who she is.
Well, security comes from dad.
Yeah.
It really does with a daughter.
She's
That's awesome.
She impresses me every day.
Yeah. Wow. And then same with Landon.
The thing I like about Landon is he's so much like me, and I don't mean like that's what I like about him, but like I'm able to relate to him, and I think that's a gift from God. He's quieter, he's more reserved, but the best thing about Landon is when he lets loose, he's actually really funny.
He really is.
He's really funny.
Yeah.
So when he gets us rolling, those are good nights.
Yeah. Okay. Ari and Lish.
Okay, Ari is for me. It is just her her mind must be like a rainbow with confetti. Like that's kind of what I imagine her brain to be like. So that's really fun just to see what I just love to know what she's doing. It's not even there is creativity.
I agree
in
with
that, but I don't.
Yes.
I don't know how. I don't know.
Where is it going to be aimed?
Exactly.
Who knows?
Like what's going to happen? The
Yes.
explosion in her room all makes sense to her.
What about Lish?
Oh, you said it's a lightning round.
Yeah.
There's not enough time
Yes.
to explain
Very good.
all
Yeah. Very good.
that there is about here's what I love about Lish. The Lord just knew we needed each other.
Yeah.
We are so complementary, like we're so different. Somehow it all gets it. There's a completeness about it.
Yeah.
I love that. So but it really does speak to like there's more than one thing.
Yeah. Well, man, we've been in this thing a long time.
Yeah.
And I'm really just blessed by you every
man.
day.
This is
Thanks for
really
everything
fun.
that you do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Appreciate it, man. I love you, and there's not really been any days since we moved back where I haven't had this overarching impression of like it's so much fun, like it's so fulfilling and rewarding, and just feels so right to be back with Zack and Lauren. So
Yeah.
we love you guys too. This is awesome.
Love you too, man. Thanks for everything.
Yep.